We now have the second speaker, Professor Terence Chai. He will give us more detailed explanation on how to prepare and write cases. Let us thank Professor Terence Chai.
Good morning, everyone, and I'm glad that Jerome has set a very good stage for me. He has covered quite a bit, so they made my life a lot easier. So my section will be a lot more interactive. It's more about experience sharing, about my experience about writing cases. And I've been writing cases. I'm glad that Jerome mentioned about IB. I was a faculty member at IB for about 2 years before coming to CUHK as a faculty member, and I stayed here for 8 years before moving to CIPS, and now being at CIPS for about 10 years. And at one stage was the director of CIPS Case Center, and I'm glad that my assistant director is here today, Rebecca, and she was the assistant director at that time when I was a director. So she helped me a great deal. At that time, we have a dean from Harvard, and she was instrumental in helping in building the bridges between the Harvard dean and the local Chinese faculty members. Okay, so let me explain a little bit about case writing. Cases, what do you understand by the word of case? Is it a decision, or is it a good example? Is it a good company example? Which one is it? It's a story, right? And some of our colleagues think that it's a decision rather than a story. It's a big decision to be made in the classroom setting, right? So this is very much the case at CIPS, where one group of faculty who concentrate their case writing on writing successful examples. They write about Geely's acquisition of Volvo, and then they write about a number of interesting stories. And it's just a number of good, well-written stories of ample details. Set the stage for professors to demonstrate their expertise, because they are the independent directors in those firms. So of course, they know a lot more about the insider stories. They make them a lot more dangerous in the classroom. And then this boosts their teaching rating. So they like writing these kind of cases. But for me, I'm a trained 100% Harvard style teaching faculty. And I don't like these kind of cases, because this is basically storytelling and no decision to be made. And this get my students to be very passive in the classroom, and I don't think, is a good use of their time. So my case is pretty much focused on multiple short decisions accumulated in a big decision making. And why the need for such a case? First of all, at the MBA level, we get a lot of complaints from McKinsey, from BCG, because many of our MBAs like to work for consulting firms. And then the major criticism has always been, your students are incapable of analyzing cases, because they are so used to listening to stories. They don't know how to analyze cases. So over a year, they say, we don't come to recruit from your school. So this calls for a Harvard style kind of cases. Those kind of teaching could be important in the MBA program. And also at the EMBA level, right now my teaching focuses very much on at the EMBA level and company specific program or company customized programs. Your EMBA students are going to be very knowledgeable. Like what Jerome said, in any one time, I'll have student 1 or 2 from the company that I have designed for the course. And then, if you just talk about stories, they'll raise their hand. Professor, you are completely wrong. Okay, and then I know the real story behind that. You shut up. I tell a story. And chances are they tell a better story than you. And then all of a sudden, you found that your class got hijacked by your students. And at the end of the day, if a teaching rating is maximum of 5, you got 2.5 at the end of the day. So be very careful about telling stories. Okay, so first of all, you need to determine the need. If you want to be doing this kind of thing. But then case teaching is always dangerous, Because if you do it at using Harvard style, you don't have the complete control. Who has the control? Students. They determine which way the discussion is going. And then you are there, your role is a facilitator. So you have to determine if use of case or Harvard style kind of a case is good for your course. And this in fact linked to your entire program design, and then at the end of the day also linked to AACSB, accuracy, and by accreditation. Like Jerome said just now, you need to have very clear course objectives, and then how case teaching can help you to achieve those goals. Okay, so determining the case needs is very important. And let me give you one chart. Why cases? Okay, and one important thing that we want to teach our students is to hone the communication skills. Students are changing. 10 years ago, when I was teaching at Chinese U, my students tend to be very shy. Okay, particularly first year. I used case teaching with my first year undergrad. Back then, Hong Kong's bachelor's degree is only for 3 years. Okay, so first year students tend to be very shy. It took me a while to build a trusting relationship, and then they'll open up to share with me in the class. And many of them still write to me. Even today, they really appreciated my teaching. That helped them to think. Okay, so I mean, first year is like that, and then when you move on to be teaching the EMBAs, obviously the expectation will be a little bit different. They like to communicate, okay, but then they may communicate in the wrong way. They tend to be long-winded. Just imagine the EMBA classroom setting. What do students like to do, particularly in China? Chinese students are not shy anymore. They like to communicate. They use classroom as a setting for demonstrate their superior knowledge, to demonstrate they're better than their classmates, and to demonstrate that they know more than the professors. They find all kinds of ways to sideline you. I mean, that's what our EMBAs do. And you really have to show them that, hey, you may be communicating, but you are not communicating the points. Okay? So at some point, you will want to shut them down a little bit and then say, hey, be concise. So case teaching is also a way to hone their communication skills. In addition to train them to be thinking in an analytical way, in a critical manner. Okay, so I talked about the course design already, and the first rule for case writing or case teaching, you need to have your framework down. And that point was amply covered by Jerome just now. When you write cases, you need to understand what kind of framework or theory you will illustrate with your case, okay? And then, second rule, short cases are preferred. I teach in the area of strategy. My students usually complain, your cases are 20 pages long. Can I not read your cases? Because it's too long. And I even get EMBA students write to me, hey, professor, why don't you shorten the case for us? Just write a case summary, and then we want something less than 10 pages. Because those students are lazy. And better yet, don't let us read the cases, show us a video. And we like video cases, because they don't have to read before they come. So I find I've become a video producer nowadays. I go in interview, and then I do a shot of the company, the factory line, and all that. So, and then they even, they're very picky. So, oh, this is not professionally produced. So of course I'm not a professional producer, right? So it's not professionally produced. But then they tend to like that, okay? And the rule, the material need to, as I emphasized just now, need to relate to a curriculum. You really need to be thinking, this case fits certain topic, and before you write it. Otherwise, professors tend to have very creative mindset. If you don't have that down, when you go into the interview, actual company interview, your imagination tends to go wild. I have colleagues who really didn't have that down when they go into the company to do the interview, and then I heard a lot of complaints from the case writer. This professor didn't know what he was talking about. This case was about differentiation, and then this professor kind of moved over to talk about internationalization strategy. So before you write a case, you need to know what the case will be used for, okay? And fourth, you need to know the classroom setting a little bit. Do you have the right classroom for case teaching? Okay, at CIPS, when I was doing the undergrad teaching, I didn't have the luxury of a tier horseshoe classroom. I have a lecture hall. This made my life very difficult. And I have over 100 students. And you know what happened? Interaction is poor. I couldn't take care of everyone. Ideal setting will be like you have 60 or 70 students in one setting, a horseshoe kind of format, and then you have a picture in front of you, and then you know who's contributing in the discussion, and then you call their name, you make eye contact when you teach. Those are important. So you have to know your classroom setting. Is your classroom setting good for the cases? Any questions so far?
Yes.
Yes.
In terms of writing short cases,
Yeah.
I know short cases are effective in terms of generating interest,
Yeah.
but they suffer in terms of richness and complexity.
Yeah.
How do you balance the two?
I have a trick. Give them a short case of about 7 pages. And once you cover the 7 pages, say, hey, you want to know more? This is a B case. And then they get in classroom, and the B case is about 3 pages long. And then I told, one more? C cases. So another 4 pages. So they get them going. They don't mind too much, okay, about you if you do that. But obviously you need to have a little bit of a control. If you fail to cover all the points in the A cases, then of course B case won't come out and C case won't come out. Yes, Rebecca?
One point,
Yeah.
point. So that's the reason why it comes to the writing style. So I've seen people who are writing about the same thing, but they can use 14 pages to release the same amount of information that is relevant to the discussion. But I can also see people who can write very precisely and concisely, and then within 7 pages, I've seen a lot of 7-page case which are very effective for a discussion of 90 minutes. So making a case writer to write precisely and concisely is very important.
Okay, thank you, Rebecca. Okay, any other questions? If not, let's move on, okay? And implanting theoretical framework. Just now, Jerome was saying that, hey, write your teaching note after you've done the case. My experience is that write them simultaneously. When you do your case plan, you need to start your teaching, not writing. Because most of the case writer, they hate teaching notes. They hate writing teaching notes. Why? Because teaching notes will end up longer than the case itself. Normally, case is about 7 pages or 10 pages. Teaching note will end up to be 20 pages long. Okay, and then, I mean, if you don't guide your case writer carefully or seriously, they will not be able to produce very good teaching notes.
Yes, sorry to interrupt that. We will actually distribute the notes after this workshop, and you don't need to take photos or write down the framework.
Okay,
right.
that's important, because I have altogether about 54 slides. So chances I won't be able to cover all of them, right? Because I mean, I designed the talk for initially 2 days, and then you went from 2 days to 1 day, and now 1.5 hours. So I have to be very concise myself, okay? So I mean, as I say, writing or planning your teaching notes from the very beginning, and know the theories that you're going to be covering. For example, for macro environment analysis, I use PAST. So you need to write down PAST need to be covered. And in strategy, I'm using Michael Porter's 5 force. I'll write it down. Michael Porter's 5 force need to be covered. If I'm doing competitors analysis, like what Jerome was saying just now, then I need to save some room or some space to cover competitors. So they need to be spelled out in both the case outline or the case plan and the teaching notes. Okay. And teaching plan, first of all, it's very important to identify the issues. What are the key issues that may help you in your delivering of the case discussion? Okay, some interesting issues, they need to be very interesting and trendy. Nowadays, my teacher experience in China taught me to stay on top, to stay very current. My students are very impatient. For example, you have the Best Buy case. That case was written about 4 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, and this case is pretty much outdated now. Even though it's an award-winning case, my students tend to come up to me and say, hey, I know the issues are interesting, but the company has exited China altogether. Why are we analyzing this case? You're wasting my time. And then I need to explain to them that my selection of cases is based on the case will deliver representative decision making within a corporation. It really doesn't matter if the case is old or new. But EMBAs, they tend to say no. We want very recent cases. We want to talk about Baidu. We want to talk about Sina Weibo. And Sina Weibo recently is making a comeback. They want this kind of cases. You need to stay very current. So as a result, I found myself updating case on annual basis. I need to, on the average, replace 1 or 2 cases annually. This adds on to the workload. So I'm very appreciative of what Jerome said just now. The dean need to be aware of the effort that goes into case teaching and case writing. I mean, it needs to be recognized. Otherwise, no one will be doing the work. Okay, so you need to identify the issue. The issue has to be trendy, has to be sexy, so that students will want to discuss the cases. And then, I mean, you need to select 2 or 3 companies to be interviewed. Because, I mean, some company, like what Jerome said, some company will allow you in. They don't understand the use of a case. They thought that you select my case because I've done well. So they expect you to sing praises to the leader. Recently, I have a case called China Utility Investment Firm. They invited me in to write the case, and after I finished the first draft, they say the case is no good. I said, why? Because you didn't put in enough quotes on my CEO. And then you didn't put enough praises to my CEO. The cases is there to demonstrate that my CEO is very clever, very wise in engineering this merger and acquisition. So this case is no good. So I never get a release form. So I learned my lesson. I mean, even though in the beginning they gave me full promise. They said, we trust your ability, we trust SIPs, and then we allow you in. By the end of the day, I could not get the release. Yes.
So when you stand with your position and say that this is not what I'm going to do because of academic reason,
Yeah.
Are you afraid, or did you end up ruining the relationship with this company?
No.
What happened?
No, they want me to change the case in such a way, because this is their KPI. I mean, the GM has this KPI that he needs to produce a case and put it in either Tsinghua, Beida, or SIPS. And the case need to be singing praises of the current CEO or Lao Zong. Okay, that's the KPI.
So you
Okay.
get the release and they are fine.
They are fine.
Understand.
They understand. They say then we'll talk to Beida or Tsinghua, who are prepared to write about this kind of a thing. So that's what happened. Yeah. Okay. So things like that do happen. Okay. And then I mean record management. If you do go in, be very careful with your record management. Verbatim transcription of all the record. I mean, let me get into details. Okay. And I'll talk about that with with a topic of getting interviews. Who is the best person to interview? Just also want to say something about it. The top decision maker, who particularly in China or in Hong Kong, in a business in a Chinese setting, you always need to talk to the top guy. If the top guy say yes, then you will get a release. And the top guy will help you to arrange all sorts of interviews. Will fulfill your wish list. So it's very important to talk to the top guy and explain to top guy in details. I'm not here to be writing a PR case for you. Many of the Chinese companies, they invite me in because they want a PR case. Okay, to say, hey, you are teaching about 800 EMBAs in SIPs in every year, and then you're teaching a lot of companies. So I'm counting at least 3,000 top decision makers in China. So if you adopt my case as your case company, then this saves me on my advertising. So they want PR cases. I'm not ready to write PR cases. So I'll go to a top guy. The case will end in a dilemma. So this is a dilemma that students need to be analyzing, and then they need to be making decision at the end of the day. If you are not ready to be with me on that particular point, then let's forget about it. Then I write a SIPS business review piece for you, because we have a journal which is almost like a Harvard Business Review. So when I go in, they spend the time to say, let's forget about writing a teaching case. I write a small article for you. And then they seem pretty happy about it because it's SIP Business Review, the circulation is good. Okay, so be very careful when you go in, you talk to the CEO and explain to the CEO fully what case teaching is all about and how you are going to be using your cases at the EMBA level or whatever setting. Okay, say it very, very clearly. Okay, and then have about 2 or 3 companies in your back pocket. If the first one failed, then always you have the second one, and then you have the third choice. So you have a couple of choices in your pocket that you can contact. Okay, and then the first interview is also very important. I have all my theories down. These are the theories that I'm going to cover. That I'm going to cover in my case writing, and normally after the first interview, you find that those issues won't be amply covered, because maybe the secondary sources, secondary source information that were collected didn't really give you a full picture. And a lot of times, the top guy will tell that, hey, this is one sensitive topic. I'm not prepared to discuss that. Respect that. Some of my colleagues will keep on pressing the CEO for the answer, but at the end of the day, they won't sign the release form. Okay, so be very careful. If something that's sensitive, then avoid that. So you may go in with your plan, and maybe after the first interview, you find that you have to change your plan according to what the company is prepared to give you. Okay, and then and when you look at those issues, make sure that you really relate back to something. If it didn't cover 5 force, then you might be covering internationalization processes. Okay, then you might have to change your case placement. The case may be used for 5 force, and because he or she is not ready to be discussing competition, then is more ready to discuss about internationalization process, then you change the case placement accordingly. Be very, very flexible, okay, during the first interview, okay? And then I say, before you go in for the first interview, you need to do archival research. Read all the newspapers and do a search on the internet, and then and find the local newspapers and magazines, get any report about the company. Because if during the meeting, first minute, the CEO decided that you didn't do your homework, then the quality of your meeting will be compromised. You say that you are not prepared, and my time is precious. So a lot of times, I'll do my own round of research, and then I'll contact the company's PR. Do you have anything that you can share with me? So I gather as much information as I can, and then before my interview. And usually I also send the CEO a list of questions, but definitely not a full list of questions. And now limit yourself to just about half a page, no more than 1 page, with ample spacing. So it looks good, and then the CEO will feel that you're not taking up too much of his time. If you are being very naive and being very honest, you send them 3 pages of questions, chances are the CEO will deny your interview. Okay, so write very broad questions, limit to half a page, at most 1 page, no more than that. Okay, and then you're prepared. And then when you go in, don't show the list. Don't take the list in front of you. When the CEO look at your list, hey, how come your list is longer than mine? You're hiding something from me. So memorize all the questions. Or also ask your case writer not to show the complete list. Okay, you need to do your homework. Memorize all the questions and then ask accordingly. And then always ask for, oh, the first meeting will take less than an hour. I mean, at most, the busy CEO can give you about an hour. And normally what I do is that I will say, oh, let's start our meeting at 11 o'clock for a reason. Do you know why?
It's like over lunch.
Over lunchtime. So if he likes me and I like the CEO, then he usually will say, hey, why don't you stay on for a lunch? Then over lunch we continue with our interviews. And also, a lot of the time I say 5 o'clock for the same reason. Then we stay on for dinner, and then the interview will continue. Normally, they like that as well. And after a few drinking, a lot of things will come out. This is very much a Chinese style, okay? And then this also build your trust, a mutual trusting relationship, okay? And always ask politely, can I be using my recording tool, my iPhone? And normally I'm not the one who's asking this question. Ask my case writer, you ask a question. And then I'll say, and then I'll play nice. I say, oh, I mean, we try to help him or her to do the job well. Then therefore we need to do a recording. Is it okay? Most of the time he will say okay. Okay. And after recording, always ask the case writer to sort out the record right away. Otherwise, you tend to forget. And always send the company the complete record. Okay, they need to know what has been discussed, what has been said. And then, I mean, this also is a way of building a trusting relationship. You're respecting me. Hence, I mean, after the interview, you send me the verbal transcript, the written transcript right away. Is normally within 2 days I ask for. Okay, if you can't do it, there are other vendors that you can be using. They charge moderate. I mean, I won't say that it's expensive. It's not that expensive in China. Okay, and sort out the record and send it to the case company. Okay, and that's about the record sorting. And I'll say, few case is always better than the secondary source case. I mean, I have to echo Jerome on that respect. Even though the case you have, Best Buy is written based on the secondary source. Do you know why? It's a failure case. Best Buy, people from Best Buy, they do not want to talk about failure. People will feel much happier if you ask them to talk about their key success factors rather than key failure factors, right? So I mean, failure case, be very careful. And if you must write about failure case, I mean, I wrote this case because my student demand. They say, hey, Professor Tsai, all the cases about success. We are sick and tired of success cases. Can you inject some failure cases? And then, okay, fine. Then I look at Best Buy. It's a typical case that covers all the framework that I'm going to use: 5 force, past, competitor, internal value chain analysis, and cover all that. And then, I also have some students from the Best Buy. I can be consulting my students about some insider stories. And even though I don't use the information, but it made my writing a lot easier. It helped me to sort out the order of events, and it helped me to understand the issues much more. So, I mean, the best case is still very important. The field-based case is important because, I mean, when you interview the top guy, the talk guide tend to give you additional perspectives that make you dangerous in front of your EMBA or your executive audience. Because it's something they may not know about it. If they question you, they say, hey, Raymond Zhang of Hire told me that personally, and then they'll shut up. Okay, so I mean, few base cases this kind of advantage. They make you more like an expert in front of the students. Okay, any questions regarding that? Regarding the interview procedures or the processes or the do's and don'ts?
So in a secondary case, you don't need release.
You don't need release.
You just developed it from public sources.
Newspapers, magazines, whatever. Yeah.
But you need a lot of citation, as Jerome mentioned.
Right.
Otherwise, you'll be sued.
Yeah.
Actually, yeah. Even in China nowadays. No. Any other questions? No, and do's during the interview, always dress professionally. Okay, with suit and tie. Then going with jeans and whatever. And also that depends. I mean, one company that I interview is a game company. And when you show up in suits and tie, you feel very much out of the place. Because everyone is wearing shorts and t-shirt. So in there you may want to change your dress code a little bit, polo shirt and jeans. That's okay, so that you fit in much more. Okay, so be very careful. I mean, before you go in, really research on company culture and all that. Know the company well before you go in. And also ask your case writer not to ask stupid questions. I mean, sometimes they tend to demonstrate that they're nice, they're capable, and then they ask questions really out of place. So if that happens, you have to jump in a little bit. You may have to paraphrase a question or make it into a more meaningful question. Help your case writers out. Because particularly if the case writers are new and inexperienced, you require a lot of coaching and training. And my advice to you is that if you have this kind of a situation before meeting, sit down with your case writer for at least 1.5 hours to work through what kind of questions, rehearse the situation, what kind of question you're going to be asking, and what kind of questions I'll be asking. So that both of us will be asking questions. They make the meeting a lot more fruitful. Okay. Any other questions regarding that? Yes.
About getting the release, what if you interview the company and
Yeah.
they give you the information about competitors?
Yeah.
They have the very internal information about the industry.
Yeah.
But for this competition information, you need to get the release, because I'm thinking it's the internal analysis or data gathering.
Yeah.
It's not like you have the public information. It's from the company. So
Well, from the company, it's okay because I mean it's from your interview record. Therefore, record management is very, very important. It's from and also when you're teaching, tell the class, do you see anything wrong with the competitor's information? Intelligent students will tell you that it's very one-sided. It's what the CEO of this firm thinks. And actually, in actual-wise, if you are looking outside the company, then you got very different perspective. Okay, so I mean, when you're teaching, emphasize that the case is written based on few interviews, and then of course you'll be subjective because I mean, some of the quotes I use is based on the conversation record of you and the CEO, and this also help you to teach your student to be thinking in a more realistic kind of a manner. Okay, things should not be one-sided. Stay as neutral as you can. That point is also emphasized by Jerome just now. Okay. Any other questions regarding interviews and data acquisition? And for serious researchers, I mean, any of your firm visits could potentially turn out to be a good qualitative paper. So, I mean, after you get the transcript in, I would suggest using NVivo or some of the academic software and sort them out. Because I mean, if you go in one firm and then you're going to visit next and the third one, you will find some commonalities, and they may form the basis of one good academic qualitative paper. So treat your record very seriously, and check all the typos and everything. That's also very important before you send it back to a company. Because I mean, I have one case that my case writer was being very sloppy. And then I have this PR calling me back that we spotted 4 typos. And this is not very professional. This means that we didn't do our job well. Okay, so check everything carefully. Okay, people tend to be very picky. I mean, because they spend the time. This is a significant investment on their part. Okay? Fine, and media, as I say, external media. And in China, we don't have the benefits of using Google. Google is banned in China. So the information that we gather tend to be one-sided. Okay, so how do we handle this kind of situation? Either we come to Hong Kong frequently and Google the information, or we use VPN. And don't trust Baidu. I really don't like Baidu. It always gives you one-sided information. Okay, so always when you get out of the country, Google whatever that you could get, or ask your friend to help out. Yeah, so I mean, when you are using those sources, be very, very careful. Okay, and Google will give you some international sources. I mean, there are always some US or UK commentaries on the performance of Chinese firms, and make use of those wisely. Okay. And Best Buy case, you can see that when I started the case, I started with a media case, a media coverage or media news. This is to help students to enter into a case in a very fast way. This is an ice-breaking kind of a paragraph. I say, oh, that's what's going on right now. Best Buy is running into problem here. So, you know, imagine you are the CEO in China, what are you going to do? Okay, and then, I mean, let me see. Okay, and record management, besides interview record, there's also video record that you can get. And also, compared to Hong Kong, we didn't have the luxury of YouTube. YouTube is also banned in China. So a lot of times I either use some of the Chinese-based kind of sources, or again, I use my colleague to help. With the use of VPN, I try to find some video records of the firms in the open source. Okay. And as I say, NVivo is a good tool for organizing your information. And then we move around. And the past analysis is embedded in the Best Buy cases. In several places, you can find the images of political, environment, economical, societal, and technological forces in the Best Buy cases. And in Best Buy cases, also get them the information pertaining to Suning and Gourmet. Okay, so they have all the information they want. And a lot of times, some students are eager to be doing better. They usually ask me the question, can I Baidu what Suning is doing right now? My answer usually is no. Okay, limit yourself to the boundary of the case. That's fair to everyone. Okay, and also in order to get them to speak, a lot of time I say you have to speak. Okay, I mean if you don't speak, you lose about 30% of your grades. Okay, so my classroom has always been very active because I emphasize that 30 points. If you want your 30%, you need to speak up. Of course, there are some people who will be talking nonsense in my classroom because they want the airtime, and I say, hey, you, that point we covered 20 minutes ago. So, I mean, the entire class, how should we punish the guy? and say, oh, this guy should buy a cup of Starbucks coffee for everyone. So we kind of have some class rule for that. So in terms of discussion, you should be built upon each other. I mean, in a nice manner, okay? So there's Suning and Gourmet in terms of competitors analysis, and then microprototype force. So I try to find as much information as possible. That's the merit of a secondary source cases. Like what Jerome say, I can get whatever information that relates to the framework much better. If I do the in the field case, most of the time when I ask about suppliers, the CEO will say, oh, I know about suppliers, but the person in charge of supply chain is in a much better position to answer that. And chances are the guy may be absent. And then, I mean, I wait and say, can we come back to interview the guy about 5 weeks later or 3 weeks later, and chances are the guy will never be available. So be very careful when writing the field-based cases. A lot of times you will find that you cannot get the information you wish for. Okay, in that case, how do we solve this kind of situation? A lot of times I'll give them industry notes. Those industry notes will be based on secondary sources. Okay, so I have one field-based case about decision itself, and to supplement that, I give them an industry note. So there are two sets of cases that I use in my classroom teaching. Okay, and board plan. It's very important. In your teaching notes, first of all, in your design of your case writing, you should have some assignment questions. Here are the frameworks that I intend to cover using this case, and these are some of the questions that I will ask, during the classroom teaching process. These are the questions. And then you should try to answer those questions yourself. If you cannot answer those questions fully, that means that you are not doing a good job. Then don't ask those questions. The questions should be directly linked to a case itself. Students should be able to find all the answers pertaining to those questions in your case, okay? And in your discussion, rather than asking the question one by one, you have to be thinking about how I bring out those questions, in what kind of a setting. And then you may design some optional activities. For example, do a little discussion in the classroom, or have a little bit of a debate that should be written in your teaching notes. All the optional activities. And then, if you know your classroom well, you should know how many whiteboards you have. In SIPs, typically we have 6. Okay, in some classroom, you only have 2. So you have to design, during those discussions, these points will come out where I'm going to pop my points. Using 2 boards or 6 boards or 4 boards. You need to give the instructor some options. In the teaching note of Best Buy, you'll see that my board plan. I laid it down, for example, pass, how I'm going to pop those points and all that. Okay, and also during the discussion, other than having some activities, you may want to put in some short video clips here and there. Because if you're running a case discussion for 3 hours, they grow tired of looking at your face. No matter how beautiful or how handsome you are, they grow tired of you. So using some video clips, and also research a student profile a little bit beforehand. Sometimes you can use the students to help you out. For example, if I'm using the Best Buy case, sometimes I study the profile, realize that 2 students worked for Best Buy before. And sometimes it doesn't come apparent. I usually start off the question, how many of you have worked for Best Buy before or associated with Best Buy? And I see the hands. I say, hey, be prepared. I'm going to give you 5 or 10 minutes later at a given point in the case discussion, then you need to be sharing with class your experience. And if those kind of golden opportunity comes, then you better ask your case writer to come to classroom to record those kind of feedback. And then it becomes a very helpful content in your writing of teaching notes. Okay, so engineer that in your case plan, in your teaching notes. Okay, I mean, you'll make your teaching note a lot better. And always prepare to give students the updates, what happened. You know, and I always emphasize that what happened doesn't mean that they make the right decision. I mean, we have discussed in our classroom about 4 or 5 options they can take. And this is the option they've taken. Then I usually allow for about 20 minutes to discuss pros and cons of the decision that the firm has made. So I provide, in other words, after the case discussion, I provide a case update, and then we discuss that. And that is also a good time for you to be asking the industry expert to come out, those people who worked for Best Buy before, to share their experience regarding this failure case. So, I mean, that's why I say that writing a teaching note is very painful, and it's a very lengthy process. You need to be thinking about what will happen in the classroom. And having a good teaching note help you to sell your case. Because professors are by nature, I won't say by nature lazy. Some professors are very hardworking. But of course, if you are not rewarded for your case teaching or your case writing or case whatever, if someone can reduce your workload, then you appreciate the person. And in your selection of cases, you tend to select the case with very well written teaching notes. They pretty much reduce your preparation time. Okay? That's the teaching note, and as I say, this is the board plan. Just now, the PST. This is a summary of the what I put on board, and then the core competence. We do the value chain analysis. This is pretty much the what the board plan looks like, and then the options. You try to answer the questions. The options of making a dual brain or Best Buy alone and whatever. These are your simple answers to the question that you ask. Okay, and this is like a flow of discussion. It's a 90-minute discussion. How, I mean, at a certain point, 15-minute point, you're supposed to be covering these questions, and then it's important to have a clock in the classroom. Not much here, I don't have a clock, so I don't know how I'm doing with my time. So I guess I'm doing fine, okay? And always have a clock in the classroom, and then make constant referral and look at the clock. And a lot of time, once you get experience, you'll find that you may have to change the time flow or the sequence of discussion. You will get to be very experienced, okay? And this is a typical classroom setting for, this is a flat classroom, of course. Ideally, you have a horseshoe classroom. Okay, so that's about writing of a teaching notes. Any questions? I'm anticipating a lot of questions regarding teaching notes. Just how Jerome was saying that use past tense, very important. And in writing teaching notes, you don't have to use past tense, okay? But in the case itself, use past tense. And always talk to your colleague if your colleague is there to help you out. I mean, share with your colleagues your classroom plan. Okay, this is the time flow, and then do you think there'll be any problems? Talk to your colleagues. And in writing your teaching notes, yes.
The company asks you to share the teaching notes.
Never share your teaching notes with the company. This will end up in a disaster. Never do that. They should never know that you have a teaching notes. No. Because teaching note, you want to provide answers to, I mean, both pros and cons of the decision. And normally company will hate you if you say that they're doing something wrong. Okay, so never share your teaching note with the company.
They know there will be teaching notes. So how you nicely tell them?
You tell them that there's no teaching notes. Simply tell them that because they don't have this. The release form doesn't cover teaching notes. Okay. So, yeah. Yes.
I really have a strong example.
Okay.
I work on a case with one of your former colleagues.
Yeah.
And it is GE in China.
Yes.
And the legal department went to the website and find out that with Ivy, you need to submit a teaching note.
Yeah.
And they come back to us, and the legal said that they want to sign see the teaching note before they sign the release form.
Yeah.
So I was very angry. So I sent an email to the legal and say that this is academic freedom. You cannot approve my teaching note, and the teaching note is just for these teachers, not for the students, and we don't want to release it. And I said, for courtesy, maybe I can show you the teaching notes for your reference, but I don't want you to set the condition that you sign the case because after you see the teaching notes, it is just like 揸住你條頸要困住你咁樣。So I did that to him, and then my co-author, who is a professor, he was afraid of not getting the approval of GE, and he asked Rebecca, shut up, don't send any email to this company.
Yeah.
And then he ended up that he really followed what the company did. So do you have any advice on what can we do? Or
Normally, my standard answer, my standard response will be that teaching note will vary from one professor to another. There's no standardized teaching notes, which is true. Okay, this is one example only. I said, I mean, I can't give you teaching notes of all the professors. That's really academic freedom. And normally I tell them that there's no teaching notes. And I've also written the GE case, and teaching notes never done. Because, I mean, that's why I can't emphasize enough. Always start the teaching notes when you are writing the case. Because case writers, they're always under time pressure, and they really hate writing teaching notes for the reason that you have seen. You have to lay down all the discussion points, the book plan, and then you have to put in a lot of tricks. So case writer hate doing that. So with my GE case, that particular case writer never wrote the teaching notes. And then later I have to hire someone else to finish the job. Yeah, we found. Yes, yes.
I need to ask you the name of that person.
Yeah. Because I mean, it's true that there's no teaching notes. I cannot give the teaching note out because there isn't a teaching note. There wasn't a teaching note at that point. Yeah. Any other questions regarding teaching note writing? Yes.
I was going to ask a question about how you deal with flexibility in the classroom.
Yeah.
Get everything planned, right?
Yeah.
And within the class, there are people who take you elsewhere.
Yeah.
How do you adapt your teaching plan or teaching notes to that kind of environment?
I would say be spontaneous. Don't be too rigid. But this comes with experience. Therefore, a lot of my colleagues hate case teaching because of that. Because, I mean, at any one point, your students can take you to one direction. If you, at all possible, try to draw them back. Otherwise, you'll find yourself overrunning. Because I got the time plan there for a reason. 90 minutes. If you don't adhere, particularly when you're first starting out, you have problem managing your time, adhere to that time plan as much as possible. If you get to be very experienced, then you have to be very spontaneous. Okay, if the discussion is going well in that way, allow a little bit more time, but still be mindful of the issues and the agenda that you are going to cover. Because at the end of the day, they want you to do a good wrap-up. This is like what issues have been discussed. And then, I have learned this particular framework well and all that. So you will be expected to do a wrap-up. And of course, your opinion will not be reflected in the case itself. But normally, Chinese students will come to me and say, what do you think, Professor? What would you do? We have 4 options. Which one would you choose? At that point, I have to give a proper response. I always put a caveat beforehand. I say, hey, my viewpoint doesn't mean that it's a good answer. Only time can prove that if it's a good answer or good response. So I share with them what I think.
So you always come back to your own structure.
Yeah. Yeah, otherwise you fail to deliver the key theory or the key objectives, and then you'll find yourself in trouble. Yeah.
So I mean, even if you're very spontaneous,
Yeah.
and even if students are very engaged
Yeah.
in some spontaneous discussions
Yeah.
of important things,
Yeah.
you still draw them back to your
I try to draw them back, or if the discussion, based on your judgment, the discussion is going so well,
Yeah.
let them take up the time, and then at the beginning of next session, always come back.
Okay.
Say how this is the other key points that have been raised, and this corresponds to certain theories in the beginning. Because at that time, the passion is gone. So it's okay that you do a review of your last case, and then you do it there. Okay, so be very spontaneous, particularly with the executives or with the company customized programs. They like that, yes.
How about getting the company CEO to come to class? What would be your advice? When should the CEO come? Listen
Yeah.
to your whole facilitation for 1 hour, or just
Yeah.
after you call, do you invite the CEO?
Well, normally I ask them to sit there, and some students will notice that it's a CEO, some will not. Okay, and normally the CEOs, they appreciate the chance of coming to my classroom because they see people criticizing their strategy. He or she would never hear that in the company's meetings. Because all the subordinates are seeing praises rather than giving him constructive feedback. So they're sitting at the back. Some of them were in tears after after the session. Oh, my company is really in trouble, you know. And then they're asking, oh, thank you so much for your feedback. How can I be doing better? And then they're asking for some advice from my students. Yeah. So they really appreciated the chance of sitting in the classroom. But then normally they're very busy, so if you want them to come, schedule their time months in advance. Yeah. And for them, it's also good advertising too. They come in and then all of a sudden, you know, really deepen the impression of the firm among my students. Any other questions regarding? Yes.
Seems that in the process of case writing, the
Yeah.
role of the case writer is very important.
Yes.
So what if the school does not have the kind of resources for hiring a case writer? So what is your suggestion?
Okay, my my first level of defense is that I ask my RA to do it, and then I'll give my RA some extra cash for doing that. Otherwise, people won't do that for free. Okay, worst comes worst, if I see that case is important to my teaching, a lot of times I have to do it on my own. In China, I would say in Hong Kong, you have the luxury of access to a large pool of people who can write English well. In China, even if I use very good case writer, I have to do language editing before I can read the case or the case teaching notes. Okay, I mean, so the copy editing usually will come beforehand, before I read the draft. So I'll send it out to a copy editor first before I read it. That's a problem unique to China, because people tend not to write that well. Okay.
So the other way is to get funding. Get funding can use normal ways to get funding, or I don't know whether your school have any opportunity to do in-company program. Sometimes for some school, they might negotiate with the company if they have in-company program or company-specific program, and they would say, we're going to write a case about your company for your internal training, and we would like you to sponsor certain amount for us to hire a case writer. So that could be an alternative.
It really varies from one school to another. For example, and right now you have a grant, maybe you'll be much more willing to give people money to hire case writer, right? Yeah, and it takes a long time to train a case writer. Usually about a year in training. Because I mean, a lot of times the case writer that we hire, they are not from business background. Okay, many of them don't even have MBAs. The best case writer that I've encountered were during my days at Ivy, when they have a case writing culture, and the MBAs are willing to stay behind and serve as a role of a case writer. For example, Rebecca was she holds the MBA from Ivy, so they're willing to do that. But in China, in mainland China, in Hong Kong, many of our MBAs, they aspire to much better paid job. They would not serve as a case writer. Okay, and so many times I find I have to train people whose undergrad major is English or not Chinese, English or literature or journalism. And then I have to train them up and put them in my classroom a couple of times so that they know when the case in action, I mean, they assess the pros and cons of certain questions and things like that. So the training itself takes about a year. Yes.
Maybe I can add a little bit about how we recruit case writers here in Hong Kong,
Yeah.
because I realize, I recognize all the things parents would say. The most effective way I found in Hong Kong to recruit case writers is write alumni associations of top MBAs.
Yeah.
And women that graduated from those programs and then worked in industry for a while, started a family and want to be active when the kids are in school, or retired people with strong business background make the best case writers. The only thing is they typically don't do it for the money, which is good, that it won't be that expensive, but they do it for the experience. So they do expect a lot of interaction with the academics. But I find those make the best case writers. And Hong Kong has ample supply. Just write the Alumni Association of your US schools where you probably got your PhDs, and you will find some.
Well, that's the luxury of being in Hong Kong. People like that in China, they go and start their own business at home. They open up their own Taobao shops rather than writing cases. Yes?
How
Kenneth?
often do you revise your teaching notes? Because I noticed that,
Yeah.
for example, in your industry note,
Yeah.
you ended in 2006.
Yeah.
That's about 11 years ago.
That's right.
Because I used 6 or 7 cases
Right.
in one course.
Yeah.
And I find updating this type of thing is terribly expensive in terms of time.
Yeah.
To update from 2006 to 2016, that's 10 years of work.
Yeah.
And it's just too much work without a teaching or research assistant.
Right. If your case is a best-selling case, of course, there's all kinds of incentives for you to be revising your teaching notes. But normally, that's not the case. So most of the time, I ask my RA to update the case for me. So, for example, in use of a Best Buy case, I use my RA to provide annual update for me. So I update the case until 2017. For example, Suning and Gourmet, they're doing something very different nowadays. Suning is teaming up with Alibaba. Okay, so this kind of things, you need to update it with a PowerPoint notes to your students. And then normally after they get the update, there will be another round of discussion.
Terrence, you and
Yes.
Thomas have used the words best-selling case.
Yeah.
Can you give us the numbers or number ranges of cases that have been sold that constitute a best-selling case?
Okay, I'll give you the examples of, when I was at Ivy, I wrote a case on Acer. That was written about 20 years ago. And then it has won several times a best-selling case in Ivy. The number is about 3,500 copies.
Is that
Yeah.
since
At one point, at the top of its sales is 6,000 cases. But then, 6,000 is a lot already.
Sorry, that's
Yeah.
3,500. Is that total, or is that lifetime of the case, or is
No,
that per year?
just per year.
That's 3,500.
That means quite
per
a
year.
few
Yeah.
companies are using that. Right now, it's down to about 1,500. Still a good number
So over-
for a
over the
20-year-old case.
So over the lifetime, then you're talking about 40,000 copies. Is that
Yeah,
right?
that's right.
Right.
For example, I have a former colleague at Ivy with the name of Mary Crossan, who wrote a case on Starbucks, and the royalty I heard, an annual royalty based on the case is enough to let her buy a Toyota Corolla or Camry. Yeah, because it sells really, really well.
So presumably, the royalties are what, 20%?
No,
10%.
no, it's less than that.
Less than 10%.
But it really varies from one school to another. Okay.
As far as you know, what would be the top-selling case of all time? I'm talking Harvard, top-selling case of all time. Do you have any idea what the number is?
Jerome may have a figure.
It's the Apple case. The Apple case.
Apple case?
That sells the most copies. I don't know how many copies, but you know what Terence says, 3,500, 6,000 copies. If you have 400 cases, you might have one case that sells that many. So really don't expect to sell that many cases. And again, those are cases on companies that are famous in the United States. That are famous because they are, when people talk about the Toyota model, or they talk about a Dell supply chain, or you know, or they talk about Walmart, only those companies. They talk about Apple, Starbucks. If a good case, a few hundred copies a year, that is a good case.
Yeah, agree.
And the shelf life is only a few years of most cases.
And for the case that we wrote in China, the sales figure is very, very low because people don't respect copyright. They just took the inspection copy and then they just copy it without knowledge. That's the sad reality in China. So I never get any royalty on my SIP-based cases. I still get some royalty from Ivy. I still get a few. Every year I get about 2,000 Canadian dollars for cases that I wrote 20 years ago. Yeah, I know, it's very good. Yeah, so that's incentive for writing cases. I know that CUHK, you still have the agreement with Ivy, right?
Okay, so I mean, with CUHK, I'm trying to get it established with the dean that the royalties should go to the case writer, but believe it or not, we still haven't yet got that established. So if anybody can help me suggest to the dean that this is not out of line, right? This isn't out of line. Is that right? Or is it out of line?
Not all the royalties typically go to the case writer. It's a percentage off.
So what is the percentage?
No, it varies on school by school. So I can't tell you whatever percentage our school, but it varies anywhere between, you know, between 5 to 40% to all of it.
So from 5% to all going to the case writer.
Zero. From zero to all.
From 0 to all. Thanks very much.
And also the more you give to faculty member, the faculty member will be much more willing to promote his own her own cases through his network or her network.
But you know, talking about money, typically only if you're a prolific case writer, you can expect to receive checks of $2,000. Actually, what to a lot of faculty is more valuable in my experience is giving them a detailed breakdown of the schools that are using the case. So they can say, this is the impact my case is having. Harvard is using my case, you know, Ivy is using my case. And to faculty I've worked with, this typically has more value to them than, you know, the dollars. Because there's very few faculty actually I know that got $2,000 checks. There's not that many of them.
Do you now insist on writing teaching notes now?
Yes, teaching notes have to be written.
So it must be a part of the case. Teaching notes.
Yes.
If
Because
you don't write the teaching notes, the case just won't sell.
Okay.
you know what Harvard did research, right, on what cases sell, and there's all these boxes you can click on the Harvard website. There's 3 boxes people always click: teaching note, a new case, short.
Yeah.
Less than 10 pages. That's it.
Does video even count?
No, Harvard does very few videos because you cannot monetize YouTube very well, and YouTube is too competitive. So you know you cannot sell videos for a lot of money.
I think writing cases is not about money at all. It's about teaching quality. Because if you depend on receiving income from case studies.
Well, particularly in China, that's the case.
Right, but I mean, we have a colleague, Robert Lee, I'm not sure if you know him, right? And what he wants is he wants a check from the publisher, and so he can frame it. He doesn't even want to cash it.
It's not about money.
It's not about money, exactly.
Academia is not about money.
For writing books. Writing books will get you money unless you write good quality books.
But the literary component
You mean
is
the
kind of
well
an
the
interesting component.
yeah we have the a question here. The case was published in 2014, and then we ended up at 2011. Okay, so there wasn't any problem with that as long as I provide update after 2011 what happened. So I provide update all the way to 2017. Nowadays, I recently used this case in January, so I provided the update until 2017.
Yeah, so when you get the idea, and then the case is published in 2014, so
Yeah.
So what's the time?
It took a while because I mean, there's multiple revisions and all that. So I mean, therefore I didn't go back and update the case until 2014. Partly because after 2011 there wasn't any significant decisions on the part of Best Buy.
So it takes about 3 years to get a case published?
It varies. It varies. Yeah.
And I think in this case, I think this is just the dates of publication. And I think Terence and some other professors like to test and use the case internally before it goes public. So that period varies as well.
Yeah. And test the case is very important. Okay. I mean, I usually get a release form first before I test a case, because I don't want lawsuit. Okay, so before I test it, I usually get a release form first. Release form says that I can make changes to the case. And I use it in the classroom. I invite my case writer to come in. Usually, the case writer have to sit through about 4 times of teaching and then gather enough notes. And then you will start revising the case and the teaching notes. Because we do change. Okay, for example, to this crowd, I'm teaching Phillips. So the discussion may take me one direction, okay, but still we cover all the framework. But the discussion may be more heavy on one direction.
So you get a release and it says that you can make changes, but frequently the company asks to see the changes when you made them. How do you?
No, you know, because I mean the release form says that I can make changes after that.
Without going back. To
Yeah,
company.
yeah.
Okay.
Some will refuse to sign that, but usually I try to talk them into signing that. Okay. Yes.
Since academic publication can't, do you have any actual cases that you find published articles that is can't have been?
Actually, a couple of my Harvard colleagues or Harvard professors, they written their cases and then based on the case writing, they publish on the Harvard Business Review or books. A number of them are doing that. For example, my former colleague George Ip does that quite a bit. He authored quite a few cases, teaching cases, and then he usually turned them into HBR articles or book chapters. Yeah. But some, I know that in Hong Kong universities do not count HBR, and Hong Kong universities do not count book chapters as well. Some places still do. Okay.
Do they count Financial Times?
No, of course no. Of course no. Yeah. Yeah, just for example, people are just looking at AMR, AMJ. I will spare you from listening to that. Okay, you are all very familiar with that, right? Yeah. Any other questions?
Do we need to verify the data source or comment?
Yeah, you have to verify data sources, and that's very important in China. There's all kinds of fake news coming out. So you have to verify that.
The information collected is the first hand from the CEO, for example.
Yeah.
Do we need to verify?
No, then you quote the CEO.
Okay.
Yeah. CEO is held liable for that, for giving you the information. You quote the CEO. That's why I say record management is very important. You verbatim, and then you send the transcript back to CEO. CEO look at everything, he okayed it, and then you put in your record, put in your database. If anything should happen, you should point to the CEO. That's why you gave me that particular response on February 24th at 1 p.m. You gave me that particular response. Yeah, so record keeping is very important.
Terence, I have a question.
Yeah.
So if a school is interested in doing something like Ivy, meaning that they want to teach cases every day in a MBA or a BBA program and doing it very intensively, can you give some suggestions or some inside information about how the professors coordinate each week or each month to make sure that the selection of the cases can fit into the overall objectives of the program. And this is exactly what Harvard has been doing as well. I know that the faculty have meetings like every week or something to discuss.
Let me tell you what happened at Ivy and Harvard. Normally at Ivy, you're taking about 3 classes of MBAs every year, or 2 classes now, okay? And then each class will have about 70 students. And then you teach the same cases every week. So there's a coordination meeting every week, and the 2 professors who are teaching the same case will be meeting to discuss the opening questions, and then they discuss a timeline and also their teaching plan. For example, the stuff contained in the teaching notes. So they spend a lot of time coordinating that. But let me tell you that in Hong Kong or in China, it's very hard to do it. Because professors' duty, the dean's duty is to get the professors to publish on FT50 or top journals rather than spending time on that.
Time on coordination.
Yeah. It's very, very difficult unless you give professors some incentives. Incentives are very important, or punishment. Yeah. For example, in my school, because you cannot always count on having FT50 publication on a yearly basis. If SIPS went to the extreme. We have one spreadsheet. We use spreadsheet to manage professors. Okay, so you put a tick if there's a FT50, 1 tick or 2 ticks. And if it's 0, then you better have something else. If you have some cases, there's a tick there to save your contract. Otherwise, you have problem. This is like what you say, punishment contract. Your contract will not be renewed. You need to be doing something. Okay, this is probably one way of managing faculty members. Otherwise, faculty members won't be writing cases because they see that it's not beneficial to my career, right? Yeah. Unless you want to go to Ivy or Harvard or Darden or IMD for that matter. They will spend a lot of time doing that. Yeah. Any other questions? No? It's hard to believe that I have been so clear.
Sorry.
Yes.
So because if we are writing an academic paper, so sometimes there's some competition for the new idea.
Yeah.
If we want to attempt some good company, then why likely we will have some competition, right?
Yeah.
So how can we avoid that?
What do you mean by competition? Competition of your time or?
Different score approaching the same company? For
Yeah.
example,
Different school approaching the same company, right?
Even same different professors within the same institute will approach the same.
Yeah. Then you better talk to the HR or someone in charge of that. They may say, hey, Paul, you approach me first, and then they're going to be discussing this issue. Can you take another issue? Okay, it's okay that one company may generate several issues that you can be writing about. So talk to them first. See what has been discussed or what has been written. Normally, when I go into a company in China, I ask them, has any case been written based on your company? If Harvard has written one, I want to see your Harvard cases. If Ivy has written one, if Tsinghua and Beida has written one, I want to see those cases, first. And then I will structure my case plan or my interview questions accordingly. So that I don't have competition. Any other questions? And let me emphasize that our students, they really like case teaching. Okay, they like interaction. If you are teaching the executives or the EMBAs, it's even worse. They complain to me about listening to a PowerPoint lectures. They told me that it's very boring, unless you have something interesting to share. Some insider story. For example, I have one colleague with then of Xu Xiaonian, who's a famous economist in China, and he can lecture to everything because he tells interesting stories here and there. He is independent director of several firms, and he is providing some needed policy input to the Chinese government, so he can get away from that. But for most of the professors, I mean, if you cannot tell interesting stories, they expect you to give some case discussion. And then, I mean, and also give them enough time. I mean, so in other words, in your writing of cases, you need to embed in the case multiple issues. You cannot get away with just 2 or 3 issues. I mean, you'll find that then the time, or if you're given 3 hours, you're just giving them 2 or 3 issues. Probably you finish discussing them within 2 hours, and then you still have 1 hour to spare. Always weaving a lot more issues. I'll say 4 or 5. Okay.
You mentioned a while ago that all cases should end with a dilemma.
Yeah.
So you're structuring your case in such a way that if it is part A, then you end up with a dilemma.
Yes.
And then part B.
Another dilemma.
Another dilemma.
Yeah.
And then part C.
Another dilemma.
Another dilemma,
Yeah.
or a solution to a dilemma or something.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Terrence, you mentioned
Yes.
that there are examples where publications have come out of case research. This is academic publications. Can you
Yeah.
give the best example from your career of a top-tier publication that has come, that was originally sourced from case research?
I would say that, as I say, I mentioned one name, George Ip. You can look at his paper. A lot of his paper is based on his writing of cases. Even the former dean of CIPS, John Quelch, some of his academic papers are from cases. John Quelch is one professor. Yeah, yeah.
Well,
Kathleen
my
Eisenhower.
academic supervisor
Yeah.
and I,
Kathleen Eisenhower is another one. Yeah.
my academic supervisor and I had published a paper based on the case study. So it's publishable. Of course, you have to do a lot of research and making sure it's very solid with a case, with also theories behind it, some breakthrough in the case.
And also be very careful with qualitative research. Nowadays, the benchmarks seem to be 4 or 5 case companies. Single case companies is very difficult to publish. And just imagine you have to sort out 4 or 5 companies' record, multiple level. It takes forever. Before the paper comes out, your contract expires already. So be very, very careful about that. Yes.
What do you think of mini cases? Let's say,
Yeah.
because I'm thinking of undergraduate students.
Yeah.
Even 7 pages.
Yeah.
Too long.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking maybe 3 or 4 pages so they can read in class.
Yeah.
Because if I sign a case, they don't read.
Yeah.
And when they get there's.
I'll say mini cases are good. Use multiple mini cases. Okay, so after you finish discussing that, then you have another one. And when I was teaching I really miss my undergrad days, my undergrad teaching days. I even asked them I give them a case topic, and then they add up the scenario in the office setting. They're happy, and I'm happy because they added it up. Yeah, but I can never do that with my EMBA students. They'll say this is like Mickey Mouse stuff. I don't want to be doing that. Yes.
How do you handle historical cases or
Yeah.
historical dilemmas
Yeah.
when the case is actually quite popularly known?
Yeah.
Say, at certain points of time,
Yeah.
in GE, for example,
Yeah.
you have a certain dilemma.
Yeah.
But the solution has been widely publicized. So at one point in time, you might be using that dilemma to illustrate certain points
Yeah.
in decision making, right? But then very soon people have read all the results of the decision.
Yeah.
People know about the decisions and the results of the decision already. Then how do you use that case for
I would say that it's very difficult in a Chinese classroom setting. It went much better in a Western classroom setting. There's one case that I use. I believe it's maybe a Hong Kong U case. Mattel in China is Hong Kong U case. Okay, and then in that you have ethical dilemma. And then I taught the Cambridge Judge EMB before, and a couple of other EMBs, they like the case because you help them to reflect upon what has happened. But in China, if I use Mattel in China, there's this is ancient. you're wasting my time. So before you even discuss a case, there's this resentment against you assigning the case to them. So in China, be very careful. Anything that's not really up to date, they'll hate you. Okay? And then, I mean, I use one case got away from that is Starbucks case, is an Ivy case. Starbucks working with McDonald's, whether they should work with McDonald's closely to, and McDonald's should distribute or should sell Starbucks coffee. They still receive it it's still quite welcome by the students because Starbucks is doing very good business in China. That's why it get away from that. But GE, as you know, I mean, after Jack Welch is pretty much this way. So they don't like to listen to anything like that.
So that's the problem of, sometimes well and tested cases.
Yeah.
So you spend so much time investing into understanding
Yeah.
the case. It's well proven,
Yeah.
but it's a bit dated, like 5 years or 10 years
Yeah.
in history. And in some classes, they might say, hey, it's too old.
Yeah.
Right? Actually, it's not old.
Yeah.
I mean, some histories are still very relevant and
Yeah.
very useful
Yeah.
if you delve into it, into the complexities.
Yeah.
But if they just want the essence, they say, hey, I know that, got it done.
Yeah.
Right? And they're not patient enough doing that.
Yeah.
Hong Kong students are not that bad.
Chinese students are
Chinese
worse.
exactly. They're very bad.
Yeah.
I've experienced it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So with Hong Kong students, you can still manage. And
Yes.
A lot of Hong Kong.
Well, actually, I've been teaching in China for 10 years. I still miss my Hong Kong students. They are very nice in comparison. Yeah.
You position those useful cases like GE,
Yeah.
for example, selection of a chief executive in
Yeah.
GE, for example, which is about 10 years old now.
Yeah.
But there's still a lot of lessons there. Very, very useful lessons there. Very useful, especially for CEOs and.
Well, in that case, you can use a case, but then you have to supplement it with other mini cases. You talk about succession planning GE. You may want to talk about succession planning Huawei.
It's non-existent though.
Yeah. Yeah. So.
It's a lot of guesswork in Hong Kong.
Exactly. Yeah. So be very careful by using those kind of historical cases in China. They tend
But
not
at the
to
same
like
time,
it.
if you talk about Huawei
Yeah.
and Tencent and people like
Yeah.
Alibaba,
Yeah.
you talk about a lot of guesswork, conjectures.
Well, sometimes it's not the guesswork because we do visit Chinese firms on a very frequent basis. This is one thing good about CIPS. We can get access to almost all the firms in China. So because our students are working there, for example, next week I'll be going to Sina to talk about the second coming of the Weibo. Weibo wasn't doing that well, and then now they're making a comeback. And I can always find people to give me access. This is one thing about working in CIPS. Okay, I get valuable accesses. But then, I mean, with the historical, I use GE case in my teaching, but that's because I worked for GE before. So I put it in such a way to talk about Jack Welch leadership quality, and then I overlaid it with my personal experience, and then I overlaid that with the China development stages. So they like it. They like that case discussion very much.
I'm curious about how you position that kind of historical cases. Because no matter how long an experience you have, I got 35 years of working experience.
Yeah.
But still, it's only 35 years.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And you have limited exposure to
Yeah,
certain
that's right.
companies,
Yeah.
for example. So when I talk about my own case, I can talk like hell.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But when it comes to GE, for example, I never worked in GE.
Yeah.
I read about it, I studied it, and I know it.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about how you position those things.
First of all, be very careful about choosing a case. If you must choose a case, then in China you have to spend about 5 minutes explaining to them why you pick the case. Otherwise, they will come to you. They say why you're using an ancient case. Then you tell them this and that because of this and that. You have to get that buy-in. I mean, usually at the beginning of my teaching, I give about half an hour lecture about case teaching. Otherwise, they hate me for that Because my colleagues are very good at storytelling. They got spoiled. And my course strategy is usually the 8th required module in their program. And then when they come to classroom, they sit there with a big smile. The expectation is that I do all the work. I tell them juicy stories and then make them laugh, make them happy. And then I say, this is not the case.
This
When
is
you,
entertainment.
yeah, that's entertainment or edutainment.
Entertainment.
Well, many of my colleagues are doing that because, and then they help them to get the our teaching rating CTE score is a 5. They help them get 4.8, 4.9, or 5.0, and reinforce the behavior. Okay, they keep on telling stories, but when they come to me, I get a tough job. So I usually spend about half an hour telling them what case teaching is all about, and still about 10% of them still resented the fact that I make them work.
Yeah, you make them work harder.
Yeah, that's
Than
right.
listening to entertainment stories.
Yeah, and usually I give them a pre-course assignment. If I don't give them that, this is something that I should have mentioned. If I don't give them pre-course assignment, they have to submit, and then put that at 20% of the total grade. If I don't give them pre-course assignment, they'll come in unprepared. And
Pre-course or pre-class?
pre-class,
Pre-class, okay.
yeah. Or pre-course, because our course runs continuously for 4 days.
I see, I see.
Yeah, so I call it
Yes.
pre-course assignment.
I see.
What if
Yeah.
they still don't come in with preparation?
Okay, if they don't want to submit the homework, I ask them not to come to my class. I play really, really hard. Okay, I play really, really hard. I say, don't come to my class then, if you're not willing to do any work. Because they will be the one who's pulling your leg, and then they're spreading, he or she will spread all the nasty words about your teaching. I say, oh, so-and-so, such professors is so much better because it tells interesting stories, ample insider stories and all that, so that I can share with my neighbor about what's going on, what actually went on at Alibaba. But I'm not ready to do that. As a professor, we have obligations. We have to get the teaching across. Yeah. Any questions? I was just reminded that I just have 5 minutes left. So maybe room for 1 or 2 questions. I see that Kevin is here waiting. Okay, if no more question, I'll hand my time to Kevin.